Qui-Gon Jinn's Force Ghost reached Darth Vader exactly once in over 2 decades, and that single contact changed the fate of the galaxy. Not when Anakin fell to the dark side, not on Mustafar or during the Emperor's rise. The moment came decades later, at the only point when Vader's armor had cracked enough to let anything through, and it happened because Qui-Gon understood what the Jedi Order never grasped. The living Force doesn't save people, it places them at crossroads and trusts them to choose. It happens once, at the only moment when it could possibly matter, and that single contact quietly sets the final act of the Skywalker saga into motion. Chapter 1: The Jedi Who Returned. The only reason Qui-Gon Jinn could ever reach Darth Vader was because he had already defied the Jedi Order, death itself, and the limits of the Force long before Anakin Skywalker fell. Qui-Gon Jinn was, by every standard inside the Jedi Order, a difficult man to work with. At the height of his career, he was offered a seat on the Jedi Council and turned it down without hesitation. He chose to remain Obi-Wan Kenobi's master instead. Throughout his life, he consistently chose what he believed over what was expected, and the Council never knew how to handle that. He was deeply committed to the living Force, not the Force of ancient texts and Council debate, but the Force as a living presence that moved through every creature and spoke to those willing to listen. In canon sources, particularly Claudia Gray's novel Master and Apprentice, Qui-Gon was drawn to the Force prophecy in ways that made his fellow Jedi uncomfortable. He treated it as a direction requiring a response. Something was coming. The living Force was moving towards it, and it was his responsibility to be ready. That sense of responsibility brought him to Tatooine. He arrived in 32 BBY on a diplomatic mission. When his ship stopped on a desert planet at the Outer Rim's edge, everything shifted. Inside a repair shop, he met a boy named Anakin Skywalker. The boy's midichlorian count was higher than any number the Order had recorded, higher than Yoda's. Qui-Gon brought the boy before the Council without notice. Too old and full of fear, they said. He pushed back, and the Council held firm. Then came Naboo. Darth Maul struck Qui-Gon down in the Theed Generator Complex. Obi-Wan, trapped behind an energy barrier, could only watch. Qui-Gon delivered 2 final instructions: train Anakin, and remember the boy was the chosen one. Then he passed. But Qui-Gon did not simply end on that floor. What he had studied for years, ancient Force traditions, connected to the wills, and knowledge about preserving consciousness beyond death was enough. He learned to preserve his consciousness and guided others as a Force Ghost who chose to remain connected to the living world. As shown in Star Wars The Clone Wars Season 6, Qui-Gon appeared to Yoda 13 years after Naboo as a disembodied voice, teaching him to preserve consciousness after death. Building on this, the short story Virgins by Tracy Dion shows the Dagobah cave recording Yoda's arrival with another presence who did not manifest physically, suggesting that even without a body, Qui-Gon continued to shape the spaces he once occupied. In the Disney Plus series Obi-Wan Kenobi, this progression reached its culmination when Qui-Gon appeared in full visible form, telling Obi-Wan he had been present the entire time. The training was complete. Similarly, in Mike Chen's novel Brotherhood, his influence persisted through people he touched. Years after his passing, Anakin used the older man's exact words when encouraging a frightened Force-sensitive girl, absorbing them as naturally as breathing. Taken together, these moments paint a portrait of Qui-Gon not as a figure who faded with death, but as one whose reach only deepened over time. Yet, for all his power as a Force Ghost, Qui-Gon did not intervene when Anakin fell to the dark side. When Anakin knelt before Palpatine and became Darth Vader, Qui-Gon was present within the Force. He did not reach out. He held back because the living Force places people at crossroads but does not drag them through. Anakin had chosen wrong. Qui-Gon's appearance would have meant nothing. So he waited. For over 2 decades, he waited, watching as the boy he had freed from slavery become the Empire's most feared enforcer, waiting for the one moment when reaching Vader might actually matter. Chapter 2: Mustafar and the Death of Anakin. When Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader, he did more than take a new name. He sealed himself off so completely that no one, not even a Force ghost, could reach him. The transformation happened in stages across a single night. The suit came first, black armor sealing over ruined flesh, a respirator forcing air into damaged lungs, a mask locking over a face that would never be seen again. But the real transformation was psychological and deliberate. This wasn't amnesia, but a deliberate act. In Legends continuity, particularly James Luceno's novel Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, the newly encased Vader spent his first months actively dismantling every connection to his former identity. Memories of Padme were treated as threats to neutralize. Obi-Wan's voice was hunted down and silenced. Even Qui-Gon's hands on his shoulders were identified as interference and shut down. The Legends source makes clear that this was methodical, thorough, and intentional. According to the same Legends novel, the name Anakin became a trigger. Hearing it produced a physical reaction of anger and pain that Vader channeled into the dark side rather than allowing it to destabilize him. He weaponized it. The more he felt it, the more certain he became that Anakin had been weak and deserved what happened. In canon continuity, the Darth Vader comic series by Charles Soule documents this period differently. Under the Emperor's orders, Vader travels to Mustafar and is told to corrupt his green kyber crystal with his pain and anger to make it bleed. As he does so, he is haunted by visions of Shmi, Padme, and Obi-Wan. That sequence reveals not just how Vader created his weapon, but how he created himself. He did not forget Anakin Skywalker. He broke him. He bled him out the same way he bled that crystal, applying pressure until everything light turned dark. The Jedi teachings, the friendships, the love for Padme, none erased, all locked inside the armor, converted into fuel for the dark side. This is why Qui-Gon cannot reach him. Any attempt to contact Vader during this period would have been treated like every other reminder of Anakin identified as a threat, sealed out, weaponized. There was no opening, no crack in the armor, and no moment of hesitation long enough for anything from outside to penetrate. Yet underneath everything, the armor, the rage, 2 decades of self-destruction, something remained. Not a memory, something smaller. The possibility that Qui-Gon had been right, that the boy on Tatooine had been real, that the prophecy was not mythology, but something the living force had set in motion. Vader could not kill that possibility. Killing it would require accepting Palpatine was right about everything, so he carried it, locked away, sealed beneath armor and discipline, inaccessible even to himself. The armor sealed shut, but it was not airtight. And 2 decades later, when a crack finally opened, Qui-Gon would be standing on the other side waiting if Vader might actually be capable of hearing him. Chapter 3: 2 Decades of Nothing. For 2 decades, the question wasn't whether Qui-Gon would reach Vader. It was whether Vader would ever become reachable at all. Internally, where a person exists, where decisions are made, Vader has sealed himself off completely. Nothing from outside could penetrate. Qui-Gon, operating as a Force ghost throughout this period, could sense him, but sensing someone and reaching them are not the same thing. For 2 decades, there was no point of entry, no crack and no hesitation, long enough for anything real to break through. In canon sources, the Darth Vader comic series by Charles Soule tracks his earliest actions. His first missions were Jedi hunts. He pursued them with focus beyond duty. Every Jedi he found reinforced what he had decided. The Order had failed. Their teachings were hollow, and leaving them behind was rational. He fought without hesitation, killed without visible emotion. By contrast, in Legends continuity, according to James Luceno's Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, the internal process allowing this control was deliberate emotional suppression on a scale that most Sith never achieved. Vader used his emotions, anger, pain, loss, channeled into the dark side, converted to fuel, released through action. Nothing lingered. Every memory was weaponized and discarded. But this was not a natural state. It required constant maintenance. Vader was not passively empty. He was actively suppressing. Every day, every mission, every moment is all part of the same process. He held himself together by holding himself down, leaving no room for anything else to get in. Qui-Gon understood this. Any attempt to contact Vader during this period would have failed. If Qui-Gon had appeared in the first year after Mustafar, or the 5th or 10th, Vader would have treated him like every other reminder of Anakin, identified the presence as a threat, sealed it out, and moved on. No conversation, just rejection, immediate and complete. So Qui-Gon waited because it was the only option. There were no cracks, no internal divisions strong enough to exploit. Vader was a closed system, self-sustaining and self-reinforcing. Then, 2 decades after Order 66, something changed. A young pilot appeared at Yavin. An untrained force sensitive from a desert planet destroyed the Death Star with 2 proton torpedoes. The pilot's name was Luke Skywalker. The moment Vader learned that name, the armor sealed for 2 decades by will and suppression developed its first real crack. Padme had been pregnant. Vader had been told that she died, the child with her. Now, there was a boy, the right age, with Vader's name, strong in the Force. The crack widened, and for the first time in 2 decades, Vader hesitated. Chapter 4: The First Fracture. 3 years after Yavin, the sealed armor finally cracked wide enough for Qui-Gon to reach through. Vader confronted Luke in a carbon-freezing chamber on Bespin. The duel ended on a gantry above the reactor shaft. Vader made his offer: join him, overthrow the Emperor together, rule side by side. Luke's response was immediate. He would rather die than join Vader. He let go and fell. Vader watched his son choose death over surrender. In that moment, something fractured in ways 2 decades of suppression had never allowed. This was not a strategy. This was a boy who would rather throw himself into a shaft than to stand beside his father, the one who carried Padme's certainty, a refusal to compromise. He who looked at Darth Vader and saw something so unacceptable that death was preferred. In canon sources, the short story Disturbance by Mike Chen, from a certain point of view, The Empire Strikes Back, shows what happened next from Palpatine's perspective. The Emperor sensed a massive disruption, a surge tied to Vader's internal state. Following its current, Palpatine found Vader dreaming, Luke in the throne room wielding a red lightsaber. The Emperor defeated, Vader was allowing it. The vision was not a plan. It was a fantasy Vader's conscious mind would have crushed, but it was there, destabilizing the certainty he had built his identity on. For the first time in over 2 decades, Anakin's identity was not being suppressed, it was pushing back. The armor had always been sealed by suppression, discipline, and conversion of pain into power. But now, there was something inside that refused to be converted. That crack, small, barely visible, but structurally significant, was exactly what Qui-Gon had been waiting for. After 2 decades, Darth Vader could finally be reached. Chapter 5: A Voice Through the Crack. The contact Qui-Gon had waited 2 decades to make lasted only moments, but those moments were enough. 2 decades passed between Qui-Gon's death and the moment he finally reached Darth Vader. He came to Vader as a Force presence, not a visible apparition. The encounter took place entirely within the Force, in that space between thought and silence where Vader retreated when alone. Qui-Gon did not argue. He did not accuse. He did not quote the Jedi Code. That approach would have accomplished nothing. Instead, he returned to Tatooine, not physically. In the way a Force presence carries memory and meaning, he went back to the beginning, to a repair shop in Mos Espa, to a 9-year-old boy building droids because he wanted to help his mother, to the moment when the living Force had seen something worth believing in. Qui-Gon reached Vader not to recall a memory, but to affirm what had been real in Anakin Skywalker still existed. The certainty Vader carried that Anakin no longer existed, that he had been weak and deserved what happened, was the one thing Qui-Gon could not leave unchallenged. Because Qui-Gon had been there, he had tested the boy's blood. He had felt the living force respond in ways it never had before. That response had been real. Qui-Gon's statement was not a promise or an offer. It was narrower, more specific. What was real in Anakin Skywalker was still real, neither redeemable nor salvageable, just present somewhere beneath the armor and suppression. The possibility that the boy had not been completely erased. Qui-Gon did not offer a path forward. That would violate everything he believed. The living force places people at crossroads. It does not drag them through. Qui-Gon's role was not rescuing Vader from himself. It was restoring the possibility that Vader was still a person capable of making real choices. Possibility alone, not redemption or salvation, just the acknowledgement that the situation was not as final as Vader believed. Then, Qui-Gon withdrew. He did not linger, did not wait for a response, moved back into the Force like water through a crack, present for a moment, then gone. Vader offered no response, gave no acknowledgement. He returned to his duties without visible change. When the time came, he met Luke on Endor. He brought him before the Emperor as ordered. But the seed had been planted, and Qui-Gon never returned. Ghosts appeared, and he was absent. He had done what only he could do, remind Vader that the possibility still existed. Chapter 6: The Precision of Restraint. The reason Qui-Gon never returned to Vader is the same reason the contact worked at all. He understood when to speak and when to trust silence. Force ghosts do not override agency. They exist as presence, not control. The living force guides people towards crossroads, but does not drag them through. When Qui-Gon reached Vader, he was not mentoring him. He was delivering a single piece of information that only he could deliver, at the only moment when it had any chance of being received. Contact requires openness. For 2 decades, Vader had no such opening. Luke's existence created the crack. Qui-Gon moved into that space, delivered what needed delivering, then withdrew. What happened next is critical. Vader closed again. Not completely, but enough. The crack remained, but narrowed. Vader returned to his duties. The fracture was still there. The seed did not disappear, but Vader sealed himself back up around it. And that closure is exactly why Qui-Gon never returned. A second contact would have achieved nothing. Any reappearance would have been met with suppression, rejection, or absorbed as fuel for the dark side. Repeating the contact would not have strengthened the seed, it would have killed it. Vader would have recognized the pattern and identified Qui-Gon as an ongoing threat to be neutralized. The contact was not mentorship, it was a singular, precise, unrepeatable intervention. Once complete, the next crossroads belonged to someone else. Luke would meet his father again on Endor and refuse to fight. When Palpatine attacked him, Vader would be forced into a decision no amount of suppression could avoid. Qui-Gon's contact preserved the possibility that Vader was still capable of making real choices, but it did not make the choice for him. Chapter 7: The Choice. The seed Qui-Gon planted took root in the one place it mattered most. The moment Vader had to choose between his son and his master, Luke Skywalker refused to raise his weapon. Inside the Emperor's throne room on the second Death Star, Palpatine had run out of leverage. Luke would not strike his father down. He stood with open hands and told the most powerful man in the galaxy that he had lost. Palpatine's response was immediate. Force lightning directed at Luke, full power. Vader stood nearby and watched. Then Darth Vader moved, and in doing so, Anakin Skywalker came back. He acted without a strategy, without calculation. He physically lifted the Emperor and carried him to the reactor shaft at the platform's edge. The lightning redirected toward Vader, destroying his life support. By the time the Emperor disappeared, Vader's remaining time was very short. He asked Luke to remove his mask, not for survival, the suit's systems were gone. But Vader wanted to see his son with his own eyes, directly, face to face. Luke did it. For a brief moment, Anakin Skywalker and his son were simply in the same room, looking at each other. No armor between them, just a father and a son, meeting without anything in the way. Then, Anakin passed. In canon sources, particularly Kristen Baver's reference book Star Wars Skywalker, A Family at War, the Chosen One prophecy, long interpreted by the Council as a grand institutional event, turned out to be something far more personal. One man in one room, and a decision to step between his son and the person trying to kill him. The Sith were not defeated by an army or reformed order. They were defeated by a father making a single choice at the last possible moment. But here is what matters most. Qui-Gon did not redeem Vader. He did not save him. Redemption is not something one person gives another. It is a choice, made by the person who needs it, in a moment when that choice is available. What Qui-Gon did was narrower and more essential. He preserved identity. Qui-Gon reminded Vader that what had been real in Anakin was still real. He did not argue, he simply stated it. That single, quiet truth preserved the possibility that a choice could still be made. And then he withdrew, leaving the moment to unfold on its own. The prophecy closed on a burning pyre on Endor. Because Qui-Gon understood what the Jedi Order never fully grasped, the living force does not save people, it places them at a crossroads and trusts them to choose. If you want to understand the full scope of how the Skywalker prophecy unfolded, including what the Council believed and how they misread it, our deep dive on the complete history of the Chosen One runs close to an hour and covers every layer from beginning to end. And if you want to go deeper into Vader's internal experience during the years between Order 66 and his final moments, how much of Anakin Skywalker remained inside that armor, and how it surfaced, our full Vader breakdown is one of the most detailed things we have put together.